War. War never changes.
Some kind of war junkie?
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Welcome to the War 102 podcast, where we explore the doctrine, theory, philosophy, and history of warfare. I'm your guide, Paul Darling, and I want to share what I learned in nearly 30 years in uniform. So let's get to learning about the most influential activity in human history, war. Welcome to episode 56, the basics of missile defense. Last week's episode was long enough, but didn't really explain how missile defense works, rather highlighting how it integrates into an overall nuclear deterrence strategy, specifically with China. So building on last week's episode, along with episodes 12, 14, and 15 on air power, nuclear deterrence, and the space domain, I'll do my best to explain missile defense without violating any of my long-expired classified information. First, what is a missile? Well, it's guided, which is what separates it from a rocket. Furthermore, it has an engine, which differentiates it from a cannon. You can have a guided artillery round. This is a refinement, a larger definition, which includes any object that is launched by any mechanism. Outside the military realm, a rocket is broadly defined as a tube utilizing thrust to provide both lift and propulsion, and not wings. So obviously the Saturn V rocket was guided, but as it was not a weapon, it too is part of the larger definition, but outside our discussion here. We are specifically discussing ballistic missiles, those which are launched nearly vertically and then fall to Earth by gravity. In the absence of control surfaces, this makes their trajectory very predictable. This predictability aids immensely in developing an effective missile defense. You may have heard of the new super weapons called hypersonic missiles. Well, every ballistic missile is effectively hypersonic, but it actually refers less to the speed and more to their ability to maneuver at that speed. So what kind of speeds are we talking? An ICBM is going about 15,000 miles per hour. That's pretty freaking fast. So a quick description of the various missiles. You have tactical ballistic missiles, also known as theater ballistic missiles or TBMs. These have a range less than 300 kilometers. Short-range ballistic missiles go 300 to 1,000 kilometers. Medium-range ballistic missiles take it out to 3,500 kilometers. Intermediate range, 3,500 to 5,500, and anything greater than that is an intercontinental ballistic missile, or ICBM. You have submarine-launched ballistic missiles and air-launched ballistic missiles. The former is self-explanatory, and the latter is often a missile dropped out of the back of a transport aircraft and then ignites. As it is the initial altitude gain that is often the greatest use of fuel, by using an aircraft to reach the first 30,000 feet, this can reduce the size of the missile for the range. The Israelis have a short-range, air-launched ballistic missile called LORA, which can also be launched from a standard shipping container at sea. India and Azerbaijan have purchased these as well. Okay, so these are the types of missiles. Now you have to deal with the various trade-offs. A key term to understand is throw weight, and this is how much payload a missile can carry. But this has to be measured by a constant range. The farther the range, the less throw weight a given missile can have. So, in theory, an ICBM-capable missile could have a short range if given a massive payload. While SLBMs could be used as an ICBM, in fact, they tend to trade range for a large payload. For example, the Trident II can carry up to 18 reentry vehicles on a single missile, whereas the land-based Minuteman III carried only 3. And they both carried roughly the same warhead, the Whiskey 87, Whiskey 88 variant. Admittedly, the Minuteman III is only 70% of the size of the Trident, with the former weighing about 40 tons and the latter weighing 65 tons. And these are tiny compared to some earlier ICBMs. The Trident II, for example, weighed 170 tons and carried a massive warhead, huge distances. The Titan II was also used as the launch vehicle for the Gemini program. A key thing to note is that a missile is a missile, and if it can launch a satellite, it can carry a warhead. So when we talk about throw weight and payload, you can use this for multiple warheads as well as for something called penetration aids or PENAIDs. These are decoys designed specifically to defeat any missile defense system and to confuse radars. Simple Mylar balloons can be used, but only outside the atmosphere, also known as exo-atmospheric. There's obviously much more to missiles, but the key thing is a missile defense system can generally only target one type of missile. The GMD system I manned in Fort Greely can only protect against long-range missiles. It is incapable of defending against short-range ballistic missiles. Likewise, those missile systems designed for short-range missiles cannot intercept ICBMs. There are 3 phases of an ICBM flight, all of which can be a point of intercept for missile defense, but requiring a different means to do so. I'm going to discuss ICBM missile defense as a case study, but understand the principles apply to any missile defense, with some notable differences based, of course, on speed, time of flight, and distances involved. During the boost phase, which can take 2 to 3 minutes, the missile goes from immobile to full speed. In order to do this, all missiles currently use a chemical propellant. Original missiles and more primitive ones use a liquid propellant. This provides more chemical energy per pound, but often requires refrigeration or are extremely hazardous in and of themselves, capable of self-ignition when mixed, known as hypergolic fuels or hypergols for short. There are solid fuel propellants which can be stored for a long period in the missile and provide an immediate launch with almost no warning. Solid fuel propellants are far more difficult to manufacture and cast and also take more room for the same amount of power, thus requiring a larger missile body. Boost phase provides the best theoretical opportunity to intercept a missile. 1. It is the slowest phase. 2. By destroying the missile in boost, you destroy all the components in the missile as well. You don't have to worry about up to 100 separate objects floating around in space. The challenge, intuitively, is that you have to attack the boost phase over enemy territory, which leaves it more a theoretical opportunity at this time. The United States Air Force attempted a boost phase intercept concept known as airborne laser, or ABL. Billions were spent on a heavily modified 747 carrying a giant laser which would, in theory, fly around right outside enemy, here just think North Korean, airspace, waiting to shoot down a North Korean missile. The Air Force alone failed to see the ridiculous notion that somehow an unarmed 747 would remain unmolested previous to a nuclear attack on the United States. But it was manned and expensive, so the Air Force loved it. Thankfully, even Congress saw the abject stupidity of the concept and killed it. But the idea of killing the archer and not the arrow should always be the primary objective, even if it's only theoretical. The best means to do that is to destroy the launch site before they can even launch their missiles, harkening back to last week's discussion. After boost and missile burnout, when the missile is out of fuel, there comes the mid-course phase or ballistic phase, where the warhead and its delivery system, known as the bus, separates from the missile body and begins to glide by momentum through outer space, again the exo-atmospheric phase. All ballistic missiles extend beyond the atmosphere by definition. This is the longest part of flight and highly predictable. Few missiles have maneuverability during this phase. And one of the massive advantages of a mid-course defense is that interceptors located in only a few locations can intercept missiles launched from several different countries and can defend targets separated by thousands of miles. They also have up to half an hour to execute the intercept. The obvious disadvantage is that you are launching an interceptor into space, basically an ICBM missile body being used to intercept another ICBM's warhead. The original testing of the ICBM Defense GMD system used a repurposed Minuteman missile for this reason. The interceptors are massively expensive, and the interceptors themselves, operating outside the atmosphere, are required to carry enough fuel to allow them to maneuver without atmosphere. The interceptors for GMD are called Exo-Atmospheric Kill Vehicles, or EKVs, and there are some very cool videos showing the testing of these, which are worth the search. The disadvantage here is the Penades are most effective, as there will be a lot of junk floating around the warhead that the tiny little EKV must discriminate from in order to destroy the actual threat. The terminal phase is when the warhead, here referred to as the reentry vehicle or RV, re-enters the atmosphere and gravity delivers the warhead to the ground rapidly. The terminal phase can last as little as 30 seconds from space to ground, traveling, as noted, 15,000 miles per hour. So here, in theory, the task becomes a bit simpler. At the speeds traveled, no maneuver is possible. The trajectory is entirely predictable. The smallest damage will normally result in, at least, throwing the warhead off its course, if not complete destruction. The disadvantages are, first, the interceptor must be co-located with the target. For every conceivable target, there must not only be interceptors, but radars and command and control. Second, the speeds require near instantaneous launch from detection, as well as an incredibly fast interceptor, particularly for nuclear warheads, which are often detonated above ground. When the U.S. first deployed Safeguard, our nation's first intercontinental defensive system, they created two missiles, the Spartan and the aptly named Sprint. The former for intercepts far away from the missile field in North Dakota they defended, and the latter for close-in defense. The Spartan was no joke, with a big bad 5-megaton warhead to destroy incoming Soviet missiles. As the plan was to explode them over Canadian territory and outside the atmosphere, the collateral damage was deemed acceptable. But the close-in missile had some unique challenges. To meet them, the Whiskey 66 Enhanced Radiation Device warhead was fielded, otherwise known as a neutron bomb, which would fry electronics but largely leave infrastructure unharmed. The other challenge was the speed to meet the incoming RVs in time. Sprint accelerated from 0 to Mach 10, otherwise known as 7,000 miles per hour, in 5 seconds. Again, there are videos of this launch on the internet and absolutely worth it. It is so fast that the slow motion video looks normal, and the normal speed video looks like it has been sped up. So fast did it accelerate that it nearly instantaneously glowed white hot, reaching a temperature of over 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit in seconds. The system was so expensive and dangerous that it was rendered ineffective by simply being overwhelmed by more Soviet missiles and was abandoned soon after initial fielding. While the interceptors are really cool, the radars involved are just as important, so a little radar basics. Radar waves are sent out from a transmitter, bounce off something, and then return back to the receiver, who then decodes the information. If the wave doesn't come back, the assumption is nothing is there. That is how stealth works. It either reflects the wave in a different direction than the transmitter, or it absorbs the wave. Either way, no reflection comes back. And these waves have lengths, called creatively wave lengths or frequencies. Longer wavelengths take less power for the area covered as the pulse is spread out over time. Shorter wavelengths provide more information on the target, but take more power. The highest wavelengths must be focused to a small spot in order to have any range due to the power and some other physical properties that I have neither the time nor frankly the intelligence to explain properly. In order for missile defense to work, you need the very high wavelength radars to provide the data required to get the interceptor close enough to the target to allow its onboard sensors to locate and destroy the target. And the longer the range target you are trying to intercept, the longer the range of the radar that is required, but you still need that very high frequency. These radars are simply incapable of scanning the skies constantly for the threat. They need to be told where and when to look, a process that is called queuing. So in the GMD example, it is a network of different radars providing both constant watching, which will then queue the high-frequency radars that will look at a specific predicted point in the sky and provide the requisite data that will allow an interceptor to launch with a high degree of probability. In the absence of high-fidelity radar data, the chances of intercept are much lower, to the point of near impossibility. So let's look at Israel's Iron Dome system, and then we might juxtapose that layered capability with the probable setup of a future American Golden Dome. A quick, ironic side note, Golden Dome was originally proposed as the name of the Israeli system, but that name was considered problematic for reasons might be intuitively obvious and a bit ostentatious, which is just Trump style. The Iron Dome is but one piece of an integrated Israeli missile defense system designed to shoot down very short-range rockets and artillery shells fired from as far as 40 miles away. Its multi-purpose radar can control several interceptor launchers and is used by several countries for air defense and warning purposes. Because of the short ranges involved, this one radar can provide all the data needed. For American purposes, it is worthless for defending the United States. Next is the David Sling system, designed to intercept beyond the range of Iron Dome, out to 200 miles, and is basically Israel's version of our Patriot Theater defense system. It can integrate with the Patriot radar and Israel's own domestically produced radar, while also using the radar designed for Iron Dome. While there are several Iron Dome batteries located throughout Israel, due to the longer range of the intercept for David Sling, only 2 batteries can cover all of Israel. And finally, there is Israel's Arrow system, started in 1990 and designed to intercept ballistic missiles. This was before the U.S. was developing an equivalent system. The Patriot famously used in Desert Storm was not a purpose-built, at the time, missile defense system. Arrow, unlike American systems which use a hit-to-kill technology, the so-called hitting a bullet with a bullet, uses a proximity fuse and explosives to get the proximity kill. Owing to the high altitude of the intercept and Israel's small size, any negative ramifications of chemical or biological weapons won't impact Israel, but rather her neighbors. Small comfort to them, but good enough for Israel's purposes. Israel's Green Pine radar combines both the high-fidelity targeting radar as well as the long-wavelength constant monitoring radar. And this system can defend threats up to 1,500 miles away, or so we're told. Its first combat use was recently during the Iranian missile barrage launched against Israel, where several Iranian missiles were successfully intercepted with, apparently, one leaker, as such missed intercepts are called, landing in the desert outside Tel Aviv. All of these systems, while providing what Israel needs, have very little use for protecting the continental United States. So Golden Dome can borrow little from Israel's system, save its namesake. So what will a Golden Dome look like? While Israel undoubtedly has space monitoring satellites to help in detection and cueing, a Golden Dome system might provide space-based radars for early detection, early targeting data, and providing earlier launch opportunities for defense. It may include space-based interceptors, which could, conceivably, provide the first viable boost intercept capability. As the earlier discussion of the space domain listed the various heights of orbits, any such capability would have to be a low Earth orbit, which would mean for constant coverage of any particular threat, you would need several satellites with both sensors and interceptors. While ground-based ICBM defense works, there are different methods to nullify this capability, to include low-trajectory missiles which, while not as efficient, would hamper the ability of ground-based radars to track and provide targeting data. To provide the conceived layered and universal defense for the United States against current and possible future threats, the technology and amount of space-based capabilities would have to increase by orders of magnitude. Fortunately, SpaceX is dropping the price of launching objects into space several-fold, making this, while not cheap, perhaps fiscally viable for the first time. So with this, it is time to return to history and less theoretical futures as we go over yet another successful counterinsurgency, that against the American Indians in the post-Civil War era, next week. Thanks for listening today. If you want to help the show, please share today's episode on any social media sites you can. Check out the War 102 Buzzsprout website for more information and to send me a message. And, of course, my thanks to the subscribers who help keep the show going. Hope you all join me next week. See you soon.